Thank you for watching this video on the MnDOT State Aid Bridge Emergency Vehicle Bridge Map Tool 2022 presentation. Back in 2016, FHWA issued a memo regarding load rating and load posting of bridges for emergency vehicles as part of the Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act, or FAST Act. The memo provided guidance on how to comply with the load rating and load posting requirements for emergency vehicles. To fulfill the FHWA EV requirement, State Aid Bridge, with the approval from FHWA, decided to create an emergency vehicle GIS mapping tool. The goal is to identify locations of local bridges that may not have the capacity to support EVs. This mapping tool was funded through an ongoing SHV contract. In addition to load rating and load posting analysis work, the contract also included developing this online GIS-based mapping tool for emergency vehicles. As of summer 2022, Bridge State Aid has evaluated nearly all local non-culvert type bridge structures for emergency vehicles, and approximately 2,000 local bridges required load posting for EVs. Now in SHV contract number 8, Bridge State Aid has started evaluating culvert structures for EVs and will continue to evaluate them in future SHV contracts. This mapping tool has been developed and was reviewed and beta tested by several County Engineer Bridge Committee team members. It is now posted on the State Aid Bridge website under popular links. Please check it out and let us know if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions that would make it better. In 2016, FHWA released a memo to provide guidance to states on maintaining compliance with load rating and posting requirements, specifically as they relate to emergency vehicles on the interstate system and for emergency vehicles with reasonable access to the interstate. The FHWA defines reasonable access as a bridge within 1 road mile of an interstate highway. From the first paragraph of the memo, it seems that FAST Act EV provisions only apply to the interstate highway and routes within reasonable access to the interstate. Fire trucks, however, don't operate exclusively within these limited areas, so it is reasonable to ask if the memorandum is applicable to other bridges. As discussed on page 3 of the memo, the requirements of the memo apply to non-interstate bridges if state allows EVs to operate without restriction on those bridges. Additionally, the FHWA memo requires that if a state exempts emergency vehicles from following load postings, all bridges should be rated and posted as necessary for emergency vehicles. As shown in this slide, Minnesota statute states that emergency vehicles, such as fire trucks, are exempt from following posted weight limits. The Minnesota statutes do, however, limit the weight of emergency vehicles to 57,500 pounds and 86,000 pounds, depending on the vehicle's axle configuration as shown here. These vehicles correspond to the EV2 and EV3 vehicles defined within the 2016 memo from the FHWA. With these new requirements, it's reasonable to ask, why does this matter? Doesn't Minnesota already post their bridges? This chart is an example of why current bridge postings may not encompass the effects of emergency vehicles. The blue line in this graph is the load effect caused by a maximum legal load. As you can see, the load effect produced by the EV3 truck exceeds that produced by legal vehicles. Even for shorter spans, less than 100 feet, the smaller EV2 vehicle can produce forces greater than legal loads. The 2016 FHWA memo requires that when load rating results produce rating factors less than 1.0 for emergency vehicles, the bridge should be posted for such vehicles using a sign, such as the one shown here. As you can imagine, adding this sign to all load posted bridges would be a significant effort for local agencies. Additionally, separate signs for legal and emergency vehicles could be a source of confusion for all users. The good news is that FHWA is allowing states to develop a mapping tool in lieu of a posting sign for bridges outside of 1 road mile from the interstate. The purpose of this tool is to eliminate the additional posting sign requirement for local bridges. The tool could also be used to inform fire departments on safe emergency routes. This means the map needs to be simple so that non-technical users can understand it. Additionally, the map could serve as an extra tool for owners to prioritize bridge rehabilitation or replacement. This graphic is a screenshot from the map as it has been developed thus far. Based on the findings from previous SHV load rating contracts, approximately 2,000 locally owned bridges in Minnesota would require posting for emergency vehicles. As mentioned, this mapping tool doesn't necessarily meet FHW requirements for bridges within 1 road mile of an interstate. However, MnDOT has investigated emergency vehicle load ratings for bridges within 1 road mile and found that the current posting sign is sufficient and an additional sign is not needed. There are a few instances where an existing posting sign did not quite capture the emergency vehicles. However, MnDOT has reviewed these bridges and determined that the locations didn't fit the intent of FHWA's requirement. For example, an emergency vehicle wouldn't use these bridges to get food or fuel. So looking at the map, you might wonder, why are there 2 colors? The mapping tool has layers that can be turned on and off. Bridges with yellow icons have restrictions for the EV3 vehicle, but are not restricted for the EV2 vehicle. Bridges with red icons are restricted for both EV2 and EV3 vehicles. The map also includes icons for each fire department in the state so that users can see the proximity of a restricted bridge to an individual fire department. There is also a layer for interstate highways and a filter so that users can identify restricted bridges that may have reasonable access to the interstate system. Within the map, users can click the icons to get information on the restrictions for an individual bridge. The pop-up information includes the route, feature crossed, owner, as well as the restrictions for the single axle, tandem axle, and gross vehicle weight. The fire department icons contain information such as the name, locality, and address. During the development of the map, it was realized that users might not understand what the different load limits represent. To help users, a graphic is included showing what each load restriction represents. After reviewing the map with the County Bridge Committee, it was recognized that county borders should be added. These borders can be turned on and off, as it was understood that some fire department jurisdictions may overlap. A link to the map in its current form can be found on the Bridge State Aid website. Currently, SRF Consulting Group is hosting the map, but eventually it will be transferred to MnDOT. An owner may look at this mapping tool and wonder, what do I do with this information? The first step would be to look at the bridges in your jurisdiction and ask yourself, are any of the identified bridges concerning? Bridges that are concerning could include bridges with high traffic levels, bridges in proximity to high housing density or commercial properties, or bridges on defined emergency routes. Look at the posting status of these bridges. Most, if not all, should be posted already. Use this information to prioritize repair, rehabilitation, or replacement. Another useful action would be to coordinate with your local emergency manager to disseminate this information. One avenue to communicate this information to emergency responders could be to include the map link and user information within your county's all hazard mitigation plan. These mitigation plans are required to be updated every 5 years by statute. The next step for the EV mapping tool is to update the map as new load ratings are received, or as bridges are replaced or removed from the inventory. In the short term, the mapping tool will be updated manually using a spreadsheet. The longer term goal is to get the tool to update in real time by syncing it to SIMS. This is planned to occur in parallel with the forthcoming NBIS changes. Thank you for viewing this presentation on MnDOT's Emergency Vehicle Mapping Tool. For any questions or inputs on ways to improve the mapping tool, please contact Jameson Beiswinger at SRF Consulting or visit MnDOT's State Aid website at the link shown.